call this meeting to order, 8:07. Technology will load, otherwise, Marlene, I'll just give it a try. I can't see. Computer phone.
Oh.
All right. Public comment? None? Oh. Business items. So we have some action items here and some feedback. Donations?
We do. Good morning.
Good morning.
Person and the rest of the committee. There are three donations that were included, a little memorandum in your packet. That board policy needs your action to the board for approval. One's from the U.S. Green Building Council, Revavant, who are community friends with Congress Elementary. And then the last is Schools of Hope program, which has been an annual donation for the last several years. So.
Does anyone have any comments, concerns about
We'd love
things?
to have donations. Appreciate each and every one.
Do we have to approve these individually, or we can approve these
No, but you have to approve them formally.
formally? Oh, okay. So just the donations we can do as an action item. Can I get a motion to?
Sure. So I'll make a motion that we accept the donations as presented.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, same sign? All right, passes. Now we have the architectural engineering services for renovation of Covell School. Covell?
Koval. And the reason that this one is coming before any other projects is we need to get Koval open for next fall. We need to have the design complete so we know what work has to be done by next September and what work can be done after students are in. We'll be taking 6th through 10th graders next fall, then adding 11th and 12th years after. So we put out an RFP for architectural engineering services. We invited 11 firms, 7 responded. All 7 are fully qualified. As we look through them, our recommendation is to select Isaac V. Norris Associates. He also has a team. He has a firm that does the mechanical, electrical, structural to support him. He is a small firm, but he put together a very good proposal package on how he'd approach the project. And all 7 were fully capable. In this case, we thought that Isaac V. Norris was not only a good selection, but a very good fit for this project.
Just out of curiosity, how many of the 7 were local?
They're all in Grand Rapids area.
Okay, good.
Great. And motion to approve?
I move to approve the contract with the Norris.
Support. And all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, purchases.
And I should just note that their contract amount is in the purchasing agenda.
Okay.
Yeah, the purchasing agenda, and then it's next on the action item agenda list, and there are a couple of things there, as Ken mentioned. What you just approved is on there at the back, and then there's a few other approval for a couple of other vendors, and we would like for the Finance Committee to act on this to move to the board in their September 8th board meeting.
Any discussion, any questions? Need a motion, please? To approve the, oh, pardon me? Your turn, David.
Need a motion to approve. Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Equal opportunity group here.
That's right. All right, now we're moving right along to reports and updates, discussions. We're projected fund balance.
Yeah, a couple of things, including your packet. The first item there is a summary of 20 of the ISD districts within our ISD. This is their 2015-16, which is the current year we just started, general fund summary of total revenue and total expenditures. The third column, as you can see, is the current year, that 15-16 year projected surplus or loss, and then what the individual districts project their fund balance to be at the end of the current fiscal year, so June 30th of 2016. A couple things to note here, and you can see, obviously, comparison to Grand Rapids there, but there are 20 districts here, and really only one of them is predicted a significant surplus. That's Granville, and I will tell you that Granville, the last number of years, has been one of the lower fund balance districts, so they really had to add to their fund balance. The other 19 districts, as you can see, either had break even, about break even, or deficits, some significant deficits compared to their total projected revenues and expenditures. At the very top there, Byron Center, on a $37 million expenditure budget, it projects to lose almost $1.9 million. Caledonia, on a $47 million, projects to lose $1.5 million. Godwin Heights, a $25 million budget, projects to lose $1.8 million. So, as we discussed during the budget time, it's really, the lack of funding from the state level is really catching up with all of us now. Mm-hmm. And even districts. And you can see where the fund balances are projected. There's still, there's now, only 4 fund balances are projected to be in double digits at the end of the next calendar year. And some are digging into them, as we've had to do the last couple of years. So, not likely this is going to change in the near term, because we've discussed before that it doesn't appear that fund at the state level is going to, the ISD tells us, 1 to 2% a year maybe. And at the same time, we've got additional costs and regulatory compliance type stuff we have to deal with. I'll talk in just a minute about the early warning situation, which heightens the importance of a fund balance, but you can see there are several that are under 5% currently, which could be problematic under the new early warning legislation that was signed into law just a few months ago. So I'll just give you an idea where things stand, as our other colleague districts within the intermediate school districts are all struggling in terms of trying to balance the budget, if you will.
Is that true up for the other districts in the state?
Yeah, I mean, what we're hearing is they're all. In fact, I met with some investment bankers just last week who work on the state, and all challenges. It's it's important to us as we look at the bond issue and the vote in November, then moving forward, in terms of maintaining our credit rating and building a story for how we're going to continue to deal with the lack of funding to keep the district liquid, if you will. So we've got to watch it carefully and talk about it as we move forward here, and hopefully the bond will pass and move into the phase of getting the offering document together and selling the bonds. Just other things that are going on here. Tell the story of how we're addressing how we have obviously addressed the fiscal challenges, but how we will continue to address them going forward. So.
Address the board, please. In working with middle cities, most of the districts, the middle city districts, are struggling with this as well. But for Grand Rapids, we committed to meet with you guys quarterly to go through to help, so that we can have your help on looking at areas to reduce in order for us not to go below 5%, because that's really important. And we are working to look at central office, which is what we committed to do, and other areas to get down to that. And the other piece is working with community partners on any assets that we may have to add back to fund balance. We are projecting to have a pretty decent win from our insurance. We did an audit. We're projecting to have a pretty good win from that. And so really anticipating that this will be above 5%. That's our goal, is to stay above 5%. And that obviously will be with the help of the board, with our quarterly meetings, just going through the purchases and making sure that we're all on the same point with what we're spending.
It kind of underlies what we see when we have people concerned about having eliminated positions and so on.
Mm-hmm.
This is the bottom line.
Absolutely.
Problem.
And until we can, we're actually working right now with partners to find out what does it actually cost to educate, because that becomes really important,
That would be good.
right? Because we know the one size fits all just doesn't work, right? We need additional dollars for support for our students, but we definitely will continue to streamline and cut down wherever we can. And again, like I said, with the help of the board, on a regular basis, to have input.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that, I want to dig in deeper into this and the sustainability discussion, because frankly, at the end of the day, what we've got is we've got staff and we've got facilities.
That's right.
We can't make staff more efficient. Well, the way to make staff more efficient for your budget is to pay them less, which we don't want to do. The way but buildings are sunk costs that nobody gets money out of except maybe consumers.
Right.
So I think that's a critical part of the discussion, is getting our facilities load as light as possible. On the other hand, so that's the first thing conceptually. I think sustainability work is a critical part of that. Sorry. Thing always gets in my way. So the second thing I think we got to think about is obviously we got to be above 5%, but I think I would suggest we actually shift our language towards talking, and again, this is the multi-year budget. I think we should be shifting our language towards talking about how do we get to 10, not how do we, we're already above 5.
I agree.
I think we should have a 3 to 5 year plan to get to 10 and be talking in those terms. And it doesn't have to happen right away, but it has to be, that should be our articulated goal for fund balance. I don't think we have to articulate a goal at 20% or 50%. We're not the county. So I don't think we need to be squirreling away infinite amounts of money, but I think a 10% is a long-term, good, prudent goal. Particularly since that, what if the legislature 3 years from now decided, well, you know what, 10% is really good, otherwise we're going to, close your school system down. So it's not, if we have a long-term goal to get there, I think that gives us a prudential cushion and potentially a legislative cushion too, because we don't control what the state does on this. The third thing I'd say is that we are in a position where I think this group in the district, we have to be looking at our count numbers will tell us some stuff in fairly short order. So yes, I think we need to get rid of buildings that we can't think of a use for in the next 10 or 20 years. But if there are buildings we think we might need the next 5 years and there's some carrying costs, I'd hate to have us divest in facilities and be caught on a bad bounce. And I don't think we're doing that. I know, Teresa, you're keeping an eye on that, but given that we may be positioned for growth here, we want to have a plan for growth that doesn't involve going out and buying land from, our CDW or whatever they're called, or Richard Ellis, or going to a commercial realtor and trying to have him find us some land on Granville Avenue. I mean, if we've got facilities and we sell them and then we're in the absurd position of having to buy them back, that's suboptimal too. So I know you're keeping that in mind. That's I think the balancing act we've got to think about. So I know there's some facilities. I know we got a building just off Leonard on the west side that I can't conceive of us ever using again. On the other hand, there's some buildings that we've had good reuse of. I mean, it's a good thing we didn't sell. What's our building we just reopened on the west side? Stocking, right. It's a good thing we didn't sell Stocking.
You're absolutely correct, Mr. LeGrand, and part of the work of the board I've asked and shared with Dr. Baker is for the board to help us with the 3 to 5 year plan, because it really is beyond any of us being here. But for the board to own a 3 to 5 year budget plan, and it does not only 10%, but we're talking 15%. How do we make this happen? Because even with enrollment, The board will have to decide which buildings you want to hold on to. And, I mean, that's a board decision. And so my hope is at the work session that we can have that discussion to look at some long-term planning of where do we go from here.
I'd like to
Yeah.
echo what Mr. LeGrand pointed out too about drilling down on our operations and data and looking at what we're currently doing and facility use and all of those things, age of building, what we can do in sustainability in the area of sustainability. Because I was very impressed, and I know we're not talking about sustainability yet, but very impressed with some of the things that I've seen in the report. I think it would be helpful to have, kind of a grid sheet like the general fund comparison here as an example, to look at age of buildings and then our current use of each of those buildings in terms of, the square footage that is currently being used in that, which is underutilized or not vacant, and then looking at strategies of what we might do to either use or consolidate. And then, again, overall, drilling down on our efficiency of operations so that the cost savings would be gleaned from that area. So I like the approach, again, echoing your statements without being too wordy.
This is great, and I definitely will look for the board and your experiences to help guide that in the 3 to 5 year plan.
Well, and Teresa, I think you did, this is essentially what you did at the beginning of the transformation plan.
Right.
I mean, this is, you did brilliant work there on just figuring out, where the schools are, where you're providing services, what our capacities were in those buildings. So you did this, but that's not to say we're ever done with this work, because every year the buildings all get a year older, right?
Right.
And population shift and so on. So, good.
Our board policy is a fund balance between 5 and 15%. So I think we all are there, and who knows what the legislator will have in mind next year. One last thing. Superintendent, when do you project that that sort of study will be done in terms of the cost to educate? Because we've been hearing about it's an important thing to really get a number on. Do you have a timeline?
So we have some information. It actually will be in your board report, your next board report. Someone's going to present to Cabinet on next Thursday. So they do have some information from the study on what does it cost, and I've not looked into it, so I don't know.
So within a month or two, we'll have,
within a month.
Yeah.
And by the time by the time you have your retreat in November, it is looking at the cost of education, looking at the buildings, drilling down on what we're doing to see how do we save more money and still offer quality service.
Right.
So my hope is that you guys will be able to take time to talk about your 3 to 5 year plan. We definitely are looking at a 3 to 5 year plan for the academic team. And so then for the board to do finance and building and everything else to add to that. So then we can have a cohesive plan, 3 to 5 year plan.
Great. Anything else?
Nope.
Okay. Did you want to talk more?
Yeah, let me just a few minutes on the early warning system. And for the last probably 2 years, there's been some form of early warning legislation that has been floating around the legislature. We actually had a version passed and signed in, I think it was early July. It was better than some of the earlier proposals, not quite as onerous as some of the earlier proposals were, but really what this does is that any districts that have a fund balance below 5%, in either the preceding 2 years, and the 5% is computed at 5% of total revenues. And that's different than our board policy. Our board policy, first of all, excludes grant dollars. This does not. So it's our projection at the end of this year under the state's calculation would put us below the 5% limitation. If you are below 5% in one of the 2 years, then it's simply you have to provide to the state 4 major assumptions in building your budget, and then obviously work to try to get it above 5%. If you have been below 5% in both of the previous 2 years, then you have to engage. You can engage the ISD or get help from the state to to really look at your operations and provide some input suggestions on how you can be more efficient in your operations to help build that fund balance. So it's really a mechanical calculation that they're looking at. And we had a KSBO meeting on Tuesday that I wasn't there, but Rhonda was. But you look at Rockford. I mean, Rockford has consciously decided to keep around a 3% fund balance. They've had that for years and years and years, but yet they're in no danger of fiscal stress, if you will. So it's a strict calculation. It doesn't take into consideration other things. But the fact is, it is what it is. It is a law, and it doesn't allow the legislature to act more explicitly or more directly, and until you have a couple of years to work on it and to implement, at least start implementing some of the suggestions that may have come from the study by the ISD or state agencies. So they do give people some time. And this is now in addition to what's currently out there with the emergency manager law and those kinds of things that some districts are under, have been under. But it's just another regulation the state has we have to be cognizant of and moving forward here. So and there's some information and this little illustration of how it works and some detail behind it. You can look at certainly at your leisure, but that is really the most significant in terms of impact on us new legislation that has been signed into law just recently. But your point's well taken, Mr. LeGrand, that the state could next year say 10% or 15%. We just don't know. So.
Great. Any other comments, discussion? Let's move on. Warm, safe, and dry update.
We are wrapping up this year's projects. We've had 20 different projects going on. There will be potentially 3 that won't be complete at the start of school. One is the Union Pool air handler. That should be done about the start of school. We've already moved the Union swim team to City High to accommodate that. It won't impact start of school. That the pool area is closed off until that's done and ready to go. The other 2 that most likely won't be done are masonry restoration at Central and at Stockton. The contractors will be out at the start of school. There's some ornamental work that they have to do, some gargoyles that have to be cast for Central, and some terracotta work around the doorways that need to be ordered. They're special items. When those are available, we'll work with the contractor to make sure they're done in a time frame that works for the school day. Or there's a potential, we'll hold them off till spring. If it comes later in the fall where weather becomes an issue, we're going to want them done in good weather so they get the longest. There were 4 projects that need occupancy. We have occupancy on 3 and are working on the 4th one as best we can to get that taken care of. Otherwise, all contractors will be off-site before the end of school. Anything they have to come back with punch list, we'll either do second shift or Saturdays.
Anyone have a question? Comment? Just out of curiosity, I know that you had mentioned before that you had a problem with the city heating system didn't seem to be working properly before it got warm. Was that rectified? Still not?
And that contract has not been closed out.
Okay.
It won't be. Right now, there's not much we can do till we start
Get warm again, or cold again, yeah.
and we can get it going again. But we've kept that contract open specifically. And we're trying to be very judicious so that if there's been a way we put the project together that can be improved on for the next ones, we do that. We did that in, I think, 3 different contracts. And so we're reevaluating, make sure we're going to follow the best road for the next school. Make sure we get, it shouldn't take this long, there's no question. But I want to make sure we're not part of it the way we organize it. But it is not done yet.
Okay. Great. Let's move on then. Policy and action items. Let's see what we have. safe and dry projects. No. So all we have available, we got emails this weekend with, and Marlene provided us this morning also with a copy of this. This was emailed this weekend as well. The facility sustainability report. And hopefully everyone had a few minutes at least here this morning to review it, and maybe over the weekend as well. And I want to thank everyone for providing that. It's helpful. We had decided in February, I believe, that we were going to have this August timeframe to have this discussion, and Mr. Oberst and Mr. Comparens had mentioned that they didn't have all the data, but I still thought it was important that this committee see some drafts in August, as we had discussed at that point. And they provided us with a lot of work that they are doing regarding these reports, energy report and facilities report, which I think dovetails beautifully into our bond proposal and the work we're doing with the Green Fellow. Does anyone have any questions, comments?
Yeah, certainly, Dr. Randalls, if they're, this is really the first go at a report like this, and if there's other information that you want to see in it or presented differently, as you know, this is a draft, and let us know, and certainly Ken and Kristen in particular can accommodate those requests.
If you like, I can walk through just the formatting and what's in here.
Sure, yeah. Would that be helpful for
Sure.
people?
Yes.
Yeah.
Just one of the reasons it's a draft is a lot of the data is energy or utility data. Since we're working on the end of the fiscal year, you know how energy bills come, they're significantly behind the calendar, especially if they're billed quarterly. So some of it we're just getting now. But we do have, in the appendix, there's some building by building data. Only the first one, we tried to give an example of what we do with energy. So, let me just walk through. There's an executive summary, which just kind of is a short version of what's in here. A lot of this is descriptive and historical of what the departments do and have done. In the facilities department, it talks about the different projects, including the museum school, the zoo school, working on the bond, and it also gets into the projects that we do for the ISD, and then our warm, safe, and dry. And you won't see 20 in there, and that's because some, like Congress, had 3 different projects going on at that building. But it's a summary of our facilities group, which is right now myself. It was Alex Smart, our manager of design, construction, and innovation, who moved on to Kendall College. So that position is vacant at the time. There's a section on maintenance, which really gives a good overview of the different types of things they do, the different tradesmen that are involved, and what they take on. There's a section on our energy management, which has been going on for well over 20 years here. We were well ahead of the curve, and maybe we've kind of plateaued because we started this long before anybody else did. But there certainly is room for improvement. We've looked at how can we rebid our energy costs and make that more of a cost savings and more efficient.
Well, Ken, do you mind if you get interrupted here? I didn't find that part as really was formatted the way to track the things I care most about. So, I mean, I appreciate there's 2 things going on, and I know that probably in your job, 90% of what you're worried about is how much did I spend. And so if you can go figure out how to buy natural gas cheaper, or if, OPEC crashes, that's great, and it's good for your numbers. And if, we have another spike in oil prices, it's not good for your numbers. What I am most concerned about from a sustainability perspective is what the quantity of consumption was. So there's 2 questions. One is how much do we spend on natural gas, but the more interesting question for sustainability is how much natural gas did we use? So there, there's a lot of discussion about how we save by, bidding out gas prices, and that's good work from a fiscal standpoint. I mean, from Larry's perspective, that's what his job is to care about that, right? From a sustainability perspective, I'd like to see, and frankly, our trend on increased energy consumption. If you take the long view and you say we got into AC and we didn't used to have AC, granted, but year over year in the next, how much did we use this year as opposed to, say, last year? So a 30-year picture is interesting background information, but for me, I'd like to see a real hard number comparing year over year. And if there are things like, global warming means that our average AC degree days is went up 10%, then fine. If our AC costs went up because we had a hotter summer, great, we can account for that. But I'd like to see consumption, reasons for consumption, and how we got it lower year over year. Simply, boom. That's what I'd like to see myself. I'd like to see very short time. The longer view is a good. Essentially, the 30-year story is going to be the same piece in this document a year from now, right? What I want to know is what happened this year.
And what we intend to do by building is put in the utility use and then make it a cost per square foot. Then we can, when we get all that, we can summarize and add that into the body as a summary.
But again, cost per square foot could be OPEC crashed.
Yes.
Right? So.
And we're trying to get to be able to bring in historical data, although some of that is, it changed from year to year, so we're not sure how far back we can go, but at least set a baseline. So from this year to next year, we'll be able to say, did we improve? Did we not improve? And where can we draw conclusions of why and what should we do?
Good.
So that's the intent.
Good. Great.
To have an actual,
Very good.
I think, noting that point about adding the actual quantity consumed, which is also you can figure out cost. You could go back and figure that out, but I think having it readily available makes a lot of sense.
And I'd like to know, and maybe this is the wrong, I'm inventing this concept maybe, but heating degree days or cooling degree days. I mean, I assume though that's a relatively flat. In other words, if we want to keep our buildings at 68 and it's 65 degrees outside, that should be a 3-degree shift day, right? So if we had like degree days in the district, we could look at the thermometer and figure that out. So we probably ought to be tracking weather if we're tracking energy consumption in both directions, right? Because it's not our fault if we have a horrible winter.
Correct.
Right, but we can quantify that and not just say, oh, we had a bad winter, but look, here's the degree days in this year, here's the degree days in this year.
I like the format, and the information was useful. I saw a lot of very positive things in here, especially looking at new technology and retrofitting buildings with the steam trap and new thermostats, and then looking at our lighting situation and how we can continue to improve upon energy consumption issues. I think in terms of format, it would be helpful to see, again, in grid fashion, just, what buildings, the 60 buildings we have, and, the various projects we have, and dollar amounts spent, and age of the building, and then, some of these new initiatives district-wide, like the WEGO system, benchmarking data and whatnot. All of that, and just what it means in dollars and cents to us. Because I think that's trending in the right direction.
And I like graphs. I mean, graphs let you, maybe I'm just a visual person, but I mean, Larry, when you did your presentation for us on, educational costs over the last 10 or 15 years, you can put it all down in a paragraph form, and then my eyes glaze over. If you got a graph, I'm like, oh, okay, fine. And then I get to ask, okay, what criteria do you use to come up with a graph, and are those the right axes to look at? And we've had those discussions on the fly because you got a graph up there, right? So I think it helps us talk about it if we've got it in graph form.
And then projects that have been done, then the return on what we actually saw actualized during that year is helpful.
Some of those, the type of projects, that's going to be hard to quantify. Where we have systems, that's easy. But masonry, restoration, we can't all we know is it's going to prevent other damage. So what we will do that on those that apply.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
We had some discussion earlier in the year also about our contractors and local first and initiatives and minority representation. Is that part of this, or is that not intended, or is that a separate report that would be given to us?
That is a separate report. And
But it'd be worth knowing, absolutely.
right, and we had talked about doing that, and we were projecting to do that in August, and I did send an email that apparently that has been taken up in sort of a broader picture of working with GRPS. The city of Grand Rapids trying to develop reporting regarding minority and women contractors. And Superintendent, if you want to talk more about that.
We're very interested in that as well, Dr. Flores. And for looking at the contractors, we have not historically kept that data, and so we're working to figure out how do we keep that moving forward, but staying within the law. So that's one. And then the policy, the board policy, it really is for the board to give us information on, do you want local first? We've tried to just stay with local first because that's your current policy. But for the bond, do you want us to go wider or stay with local first? That's really something that you guys will look at. And again, that we're planning on that being part of the retreat because I think it's a discussion for you guys to decide. And then if we can't get the work done with local first companies, then when do we start moving out? And then how do we share that with you to get your input? Does that make sense, you guys? Mm-hmm. So the background is something that we have to build because we don't collect that data. And then, Ken, maybe you can share what the city is doing because we're trying to work with the city to help with the minority contractors.
Just so you're up to speed on what our local first program is, we provide a 5% bid discount to any contractor or subcontractor whose address is within the city of Grand Rapids. They don't have to pre-qualify. They don't have to pre-apply. They can. It's in the bid documents. If they don't, we check all addresses and award that here regardless. There's also a way if you're a general and you have a certain number or percentage of subcontractors that qualify to gain that, whether you're local or not. That is different than the city's program, which is a county-wide, not citywide, and you have to pre-apply and be I'm not sure if pre-registered is the term or not. So, to be honest, we have not had a lot of success with our local first. It can do better. For whatever reason, we rely on the bidders to come to us. We do provide free documents. We advertise at all the local plan houses, the Builders Exchange, and there's one where we make sure anybody coming in can have a free set of documents. They don't have to be a member there, they can get one. And so they don't have to spend that $100, $150 printing cost for them. We've started to look, are there other ways, other things we should include? And, as far as what qualifies to be local, we talked about many things that we haven't really landed on yet. To make it more enticing for local contractors and more beneficial for them to bid on our products, because we do want to make sure as we get into the bond that those significant dollars have a primary investment locally.
The other thing that we're doing, I've spoken with Daryl Ross from Link because they have a really nice policy, and they're doing some things with Local First. And so Daryl's going to host a session for local people to come and for us to learn more about it.
Did anyone have? This was brought up, and Mr. LeGrand was pointing out, we are certainly, our goal with this committee was having a discussion about how do we track or how do we look at, or is that important to look at this concept? Mm-hmm. Not necessarily that we are looking to create something that would at all favor one particular group or another, but how are we somehow creating barriers the way that things are offered. And that's sort of where we're trying to drill down and not necessarily create a policy where we want women and minorities. Of course, we want women and minority contractors to get these jobs, but that's not the goal. And so, just for clarification, we're not trying to do something that's not transparent or
No, absolutely.
above board, but more make it available and see, is there anything else that the district can do to help keep
That's
dollars
right.
locally in Grand Rapids?
I think it's an issue of equal access and equal opportunity in that whole process. And if there are barriers, the data will show that, where we're trending.
Anything else? Do you want to mention anything else?
On the sustainability issue, yeah. I would, again, one of the things that I think that I'd love to have, and I guess this is for all three of you in different ways, but, and this is before Dr. Flores was on the board, we had a presentation from Professor Hune from Calvin College. Calvin, for some years, has had not a sinking fund, but a rotating sustainability pool of money. And I think that's a very useful mechanism because that mechanism involves a report where you say, look, we had $100,000 we invested in this particular thing. It gave us, because we looked at 5 different environmental sustainable things we could have done. One of them had a 3% return on investment. This one had a 20% return on investment, so we did the thing that had a 20% ROI. And that means we're going to recapture that 20%, and it's going to go back into the sustainable pool, and then we're going to use that money going forward for our next projects and move down the line. So, if solar panels have a 7% ROI, which is probably accurate, and putting better door stops in the buildings has a 30% ROI, then we should do the door stops first and eventually get to solar panels. But I think that kind of return on investment analysis really, really is unassailable. Nobody can criticize us for doing something if we can show that we did it because it's got a good ROI. I mean, Peter Wegge, may he rest in peace, bless his soul, paid for wind turbines on City High School. Well, those wind turbines produce less power than the monitors draw to monitor how much power the wind turbines produce. So those wind turbines are environmentally silly. The ROI on those things is absolutely non-existent. They're not justifiable by any metrics. Now, that was Peter Wegge's money, and he can spend his money however he wants. And I have a wind turbine on my cottage because I think it's amusing too. But I'm under no illusions that it was a rational investment for City High or for me personally. Solar panels, on the other hand, are rational, but there's a sliding scale of return on investment. And so I think that having a specific fund that we could generate that analysis on annually would be great. And I really, but we got to prime that pump. So Larry and Teresa, we'd have to say, and board, we'd have to say, okay, we want to stick $200,000 next year into an earmarked fund, and that's going to have to actually, it's real money, so it's going to have to come out of the budget. And if we design it right, it comes out once, and it sustains itself. And the projects then, it gets to say to the district then, well, I made you $30,000 on energy savings, so give me my $30,000 back. The fund sort of gets to talk to the district and be not an autonomous fund, but it's a separate pile of money. It's not run by anybody else except us, but it's a separate pile of money, and then we can directly track those investments, as opposed to saying, well, we put in light bulbs and we kind of think that was a good idea, and we forget about it next year. This way, the fund itself tracks and justifies, and every year it gets to collect on its investment in those things. So I think that'd be a good idea. I know we're not there yet, but I'd love to see that in the next year.
But that is something that we talked about doing, and Calvin offered to help us with that.
Right.
Calvin College offered to partner
I mean,
with
things
this.
are tight. I don't want to be firing teachers so we can start an environmental fund. I don't want to be doing, we're going to have to be able to see somewhere we can justify getting this money out of the budget. but it's also long-term fiscal planning for the district, right?
Right, that's
We
right.
long-term fiscal plan all the time. Anytime we put a roof on a place, we're planning on owning that building for more than 2 years, or we wouldn't have put a roof on it, right? And so we're allowed to invest for the long term, but we have to, at the same time, make sure that we're not pinching our budget in ways that we can't justify pinching it. So.
And we will have that ready for you at the November when we talk about finance and long-term planning. We'll have something.
So if you don't want to do it, Teresa, that's fine. I'm just suggesting.
Yeah. No, it's a great idea. It's actually what we talked about in the beginning.
Don't commit,
No.
right?
No,
I mean,
no.
talk to Larry.
No,
But this has been
That
a
was
long,
part of-
this has
this
been,
was-
since our
We
ad
have.
hoc sustainability committee.
Right. We talked over a year
superintendent's been
ago
very
of how
interested in
do
this.
we do that and put the money back. And actually, there's quite a bit of savings from what I understand from other districts, up to 30%. Because I talked about with a couple districts $100,000, and they thought that over the years at $100,000 you could have $500,000 to $1 million just by saving. So we're looking into it.
Good. Great, thanks.
Good. Anything else?
We'll bring this back next month, just so for an update. I want to promise it'll be complete, because I don't know when all the data will be
Sure,
received. But
yeah.
we'll bring it back until we're complete.
Great.
Great.
Thanks.
Great. Thanks so much. Meeting adjourned.